Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art, where we do deep dives into deep cuts and help you understand why damn things matter. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art and music, focusing on album Zenyatta Mandatta, the forgotten middle child of band The Police. To hash things out, we're once again joined by our favorite law enforcement, and that is Mr. Theodore T. Buckingham. Welcome back to the show, Buck.
Thank you. I brought my mirrored sunglasses
Ooh.
for the occasion. I shaved my beard and I just have a handlebar mustache.
Now, did you dye your hair blonde is the real question.
Oh, in favor of Sting? Yes.
Favor of all of them. They were,
They were all blonde, if I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, they tried to what was it? Convince everyone they were a punk band, and for some reason, blonde hair was associated with punk back in the day.
That makes
So
sense.
they died. And actually, we can already do a T-Buck tangent corner. They did that by accident. They were
Really?
struggling to get money, and they at the beginning, of course, like everyone's in the beginning of every artistic career, and they booked like a commercial with Wrigley, like the chewing gum, and they were asked to dye their hair blonde. Of course, the commercial never made it to air, but we all got to see their blonde hair from promotional, photos and album art, things like that, and the rest is history.
That is hilarious. But yeah, I could see I do think punk was kind of associated with that back then. I'm thinking of like Sex Pistols.
Sex Pistols, The Clash. I don't know. I beg to differ. When I think of The Clash, maybe Sex Pistols, but when I think of The Clash and some of those guys, I just remember like kind of like a greaser's look, like slick black hair, toothpick out the mouth, cigarette hanging off the lip, that's kind of the image I have. Jean jacket,
I have
jean jacket with the sleeves cut off.
See, I have a different one. I have like Henry Rollins.
Okay, you have like 90s punk.
Yeah.
Like
but that's what we kind of
NoFX,
grew up with.
Rancid, Henry Rollins, Dead Kennedys, all those guys.
I will say when I think about punk, I do not first think of Gordon Matthew Thomas Sumner.
I never think of Gordon. I never ever think of Gordon. He's a pretty
boy. I never
boy.
think of him either.
But I actually feel like he doesn't get enough love because he's a pretty boy, and I want to do a T-Buck tangent corner about that. But before we do, Buck, let's tell the good people why we're not just focusing on the career of the Police. Like that would be an easy retrospective episode, right? 5 albums, top to bottom. We're focusing on Zenyatta Mandatta today because it doesn't get enough love like the other albums. And after years and years of our own retrospection and re-examination, I think it deserves an incredible amount of much more love and attention, because everybody has effing covered the rest of their career, top to bottom, left and right. And we don't like to do that on our show, right, Buck? So we're going to focus on the forgotten children of the arts. And Zenyatta Mandatta is one of them, though it's often regarded as their weakest entry, which we fucking hate on our show. The art is so subjective. There's no such thing really as weak or strong. There's definitely, I kind of understand the concept of best of or greatest hits, things like that. That I can understand those adjectives. Great, best, but weak and strong is so subjective, because we would argue, guys, that which we'll dive into today. We would argue that Zenyatta Mandatta is actually the Police at their most playful, most exploratory, most experimental. So with that in mind, we have to note, Buck and I talked about this in length. We have to make a note. We're not saying this is the best album. We're not saying this is the best album.
I was actually shocked when you wanted to talk about this.
We're not saying it's the best album. We're saying, because we all know what the best album is. We're looking at you, Synchronicity. We are saying that that the album is in dire need of re-examination. And most importantly, as already stated, a lot more attention and love, because time heals all artistic wounds, Buck. Time heals all wounds, and it's time we do the same.
Except if it's Pablo Honey.
Hey, we have a
I'm just
show. We
joking.
have a show lined up in 2025 in April.
Yep.
We're already going to talk about Pablo Honey. It's on the books. But today we're talking about Zenyatta Mandatta.
Not Zendaya either,
Not to be
which kept
confused.
wanting to call it Zendaya Mondatta.
Zendaya Mandatta. I kind of like that. Ooh,
I
kind of
know.
rolls off the tongue too.
Yeah.
Now, before we can discuss, of course, we all need a little background. The Police were formed in London in 1977. The band was composed of Stuart Copeland on drums and percussion, Andy Summers on guitar, and on everything else, as already stated, Gordon Matthew Thomas Sumner, otherwise known as, you probably know him better as, Sting. That's Sting. That's who we were talking about in the intro, Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
In their short 9 years as a band, they made 5 studio albums, sold 75 million records and counting, winning a number of awards along the way, including 6 Grammys and 2 Brit Awards, as well as being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003. Of their 5 studio albums, of course, we're focusing on Zenyatta Mandatta, which was released on October 3rd, 1980, and was produced by Nigel Gray and, of course, the band. Now, before we get into the juicy middle, guys, we're going to take a little break. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Support for this show is brought to you by novel Till the Bitter Endemic. What if there was a happy ending to a pandemic? Perhaps an unexpected love story. After Daisy gets thrust into mandatory quarantine for an infection she can't explain, it's up to her to unravel the truth as to what's behind it and what she can ultimately do to escape it. But she can't do this alone, and that's where she finds not only herself, but a very special person that opens their heart for the betterment of their survival. Find out how in Till the Bitter Endemic. Available now on Amazon in all major formats.
All right, we are back. Buck, time to do the damn thing. And I want to start the conversation with this. To understand Zenyatta Mandatta, we really do have to understand their career as a whole. So even though we're not going to dive deep into every album before it and every album after, we are going to touch upon it a little bit. But for the good people that have never heard the Police, I'm looking at you, Riles. I want to give that's just going to be our new bit. I'm going to say that every time for the record. So for the good people that have never heard the Police, let's give the good people a primer. Buck, if you've never heard the Police, how would you sum up their sound, their aesthetic, their musicality?
Ooh.
Ooh.
They're very much kind of like a blend between kind of rock and a lot of like reggae like tones.
Right.
It's you just put me on the spot. It's actually kind of hard to pin down their sound.
Well, that's the beauty of the Police. The Police,
yeah.
the greatest acts of all time have always created their own signature sound and their own identity as musicians. And because that's the correct primer to the primer. It's kind of hard. Hard, but you dig deep and try your best in a sentence or two, and then of course I'll help you out as the anchor.
Okay.
No pressure.
I'm formulating.
No pressure. Formulating. Enhance. We're at Blade Runner. We're watching Blade Runner. Enhance. Enhance.
If I think of their entire catalog, because I do think they sounded different in the beginning than they did.
Totally. Absolutely.
But I would say they were more of like a cross between reggae, a little bit of sprinkle in a little bit of new wave.
Yes, absolutely.
Not punk, but maybe
punk adjacent. Punk sensibilities,
like
post punk, but not never mind the Bullocks punk, not the Clash.
We're not
punk.
We're not talking Clash. We're not talking about Sex Pistols or anything like that. I think that's a good way of putting them. A little poppy too.
Oh yeah, a
little poppy.
I actually think the greatest trick they pulled on us all, hence the 75 million records sold and counting, is that they eventually convinced us that they were a pop band with pop sensibilities because of their singles. But when you dig deep, you see that, yes, they're genre bending. There is definitely reggae, and it's because there was a huge reggae scene in London at the time, hence Andy Summers picking that up. They were big Bob Marley fans. One category you forgot, they were ska adjacent as well.
Ooh, I did
like
not
with
think
horn
of that.
sections and stuff. The ska adjacent, but also because of Stuart Copeland, jazz, world, specifically Arabic rhythms, the Baladi in the family of the Maksum. Do a little Novo Day music theory corner there. So I won't get too much into the rhythmic foundations of what made the police, but part of that was they were using Middle Eastern and Eastern rhythms that we had never seen before in the West. And honestly, to this day, we still really don't use. We almost never
No.
use Middle East and Eastern rhythms. And that's where the Arabic rhythm, the Baladi, is so key to a lot of the foundations of what made Stuart Copeland. And then he brought that into the police, but along with Andy Summers with his reggae sensibilities. And then we got Sting. I want to talk about Sting for a little bit because Buck is a bass player, and in his former life, he was a bass player. I don't think you've picked it up in a while, but I know you have a lot to say about bass players as a former bass player. Number one, and we joked about this in the intro, being a pretty boy, I think a lot of people don't consider him as one of the best bass players like that's ever lived, like a Jaco Pastorius and all those guys like a Wooten. But I would argue he's up there.
I think I think he's been kind of a lot of people have given him more of a hard time or have dismissed his abilities. I think he's pretty good. It drives me nuts the way he plays though sometimes.
Ooh, elaborate. Like
why? The thumb.
Okay.
I think that's a big which I'm not saying
playing
like
technique. Usually index finger and middle finger is bass playing best.
Like me, I did 3 to 4
with the occasional pluck drum if they want that punk sound. You know, like you can, So Lonely. You know,
and
LP1.
Your thumb is not easily. I mean, you slap with your thumb a lot, but like the strumming with the thumb has always kind of drove me a little nuts. And that's just because of the way I was trained and like told like proper bass form and how you're supposed to hold the bass and how you're supposed to play. And and that's unfair because a lot of guys do play with, picks and stuff like that. I've never been a big pick player with the bass, but it's that's the only thing. But I would say he's very good.
Yeah, I would say that's a little bit of a nitpick because, like Jimi Hendrix famously, because he had these big, huge fucking hands, he had to use his thumb a lot with a lot of the chord figures and stuff like that. I think it just comes down to style and it's subjective. But I've always liked Sting's bass playing.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not bad. The one thing I will give him props because something I can't do or never could do is I can't sing and
fuck me neither. Oh my, it is so hard to separate your and remember I come from a drumming background. I'm already pretty good about separating my body by limb, but then you add in a vocal. Jesus Christ, that's tough. Oh my God!
Yeah, it's rough. Like,
but we can get into that here in a minute because he famously did not sing and play bass on the studio albums. He would write the pieces or help to write the pieces with the other guys. They would lay down the tracks, and then he would overdub the vocal most of the time because his bass lines would get pretty complicated sometimes. I'm looking at you, Spirits in a Material World, like. Some of them got like fucking like I couldn't even count it kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's not too uncommon during recording.
You don't still to this day we do that.
Yeah, you even guys that do that. I mean, all the way back to the 50s and 60s, they weren't they were already kind of overdubbing stuff like that. And you know what? I always give the example. I always bring it up, or the Beach Boys. Beach Boys, especially like albums like Pet Sounds. Most of the band did not even play the instrumentation on those albums. It was done by a studio band, and they just sang over it. So I mean that's not uncommon.
Not uncommon at all. And we see the formula. Sting eventually acquired a songwriting style. And by the third LP, we see his style staples really shine through. So he likes to write a lot of the same kind of vocal melodies as it adds a counter melody to the main melodies of the track. And of course, he has the very famous double vocal line production approach where it's very loose. Like if you think of something the opposite, like a super tight double vocal recording is like honestly Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters has like a almost like perfectly in line, where this one is very loose to the point where it becomes its own thing, a production technique that creates kind of another level of texture and harmony to the overall piece. I actually like the looser double vocal production approach. And then, of course, the outro, the repetitive chorus outro. And then they do what I know Buck hates. They just turn that volume down.
Oh my God.
They do a fade out. I love the fade out.
Such a cop out.
I don't think it's a cop out. I think I will argue with you right now. Here's why it's not a cop out, is because back in the analog days, when we actually had the band in the room playing, even though if we didn't have vocals, sometimes when they're on, either financial constraints, or in this case, they had to go on the tour the fucking day of the end of the studio recording sessions. They sometimes haven't gotten that far, and they know they don't have a stopping place quite yet, and they usually probably figure that out while they're on tour. But when they're in the zone and all the musicians are, they're doing a perfect take, and they don't want to redo it, we need to leave that on the album, right? And if they don't have a proper ending, we just need to fade that bitch out.
But this is what used to drive me nuts as even a small lad. Like I'm not even kidding. Like 5 or 6, I used to think about this. I was like, well, when they're playing the song live at a concert, like, what do they do? Do they just turn the volume down on their instruments? Do they find a stopping point?
No, there's a leader in every band. It's usually in this case the drummer and or of course the literal leader of the band, the singer songwriter, the vocalist, the lead singer, in this case Sting. He probably would turn around and motion with his guitar like, okay, we're ending here. Like, he would give that special wink at the band. So,
but still,
but the audience
when I still think about it to this day, like, well, how are they going to end this song if they're just going to fade out on it? Because here's the deal: like, it to me, it feels awkward. Like, do you just
these are
because I have
musicians.
seen it live when they've done it, and it's been like kind of an awkward ending. It's like, oh, that's how you end it.
Well, these are master musicians.
See, these are the things that run
remember there was
a
certain proficiency in the 70s and 80s and a little bit to the 90s that we lost in the 2000s because of things like Pro Tools. And even though those can be used as a tool, a literal tool as well, to make musicians even better, a lot of them used them as a crutch. So they didn't have to be in the room with the rest of the band, playing. You could.
Is that a crutch, or is that just like a?
I think it's a crutch if it's doing the work for you, like, actually playing, like auto tune kind of sensibilities. Like, oh, well, we'll just fix that in post. Auto tune. Oh, they messed up here, they messed up there. Versus, I'm okay with 100 tries. Versus these guys, they would do 2 or 3 tries, right?
But auto-tune is a tool because you can't sing,
right? Well, think about all the artists that can't sing well. In the 70s or 80s, they would have never even made the cut.
Yeah. I mean, what was that producer said when auto-tune? He heard it for the first time. He said, "Now we don't have to find good singers; we can just find pretty people."
Exactly. Well, but case in point, you nailed it on the head.
Yeah, but with Pro Tools, though, you're making something easier to do. You're not necessarily cheating.
I'm not saying you're cheating. I'm saying that it can be a crutch. It should be used as a tool and not a crutch, is all I'm saying. I'm not necessarily saying you're cheating. There's a
Ladies
difference.
and gentlemen, thank you for putting up with our little disagreement.
Should I pull it back? Let's do a Novo pullback.
This was brought to you by Focusrite.
This was brought to you by Pfizer. Pain medication.
Pain medication.
Right
now,
we like to argue.
Remember,
we're two sides of the same coin, Buck. That's why we're perfect co-hosts to each other. So, but let's pull it back. You're right. We've been talking about this way too much. Let's do a Novo pullback and let's talk music. Let's get into their discography. And again, you can't understand Zenyatta Mondatta without understanding their first 2 LPs. We start with the Outlandos de Amor in 1978. De Amor.
I was not expecting that.
Outlandos de Amor. Well, I'm kind of putting a Spanish twist on it. It's a French. Yes. It's a French saying.
It's it's a French saying.
It's outlaws of love. Outlaws of love.
Yeah.
And we do.
So edgy.
We're so edgy. And we
Yeah,
see,
those are
I, to your point, when we're giving the primer, this one was a little more raw, had those little punk sensibilities, a little more growl and Sting's vocal. And though it's a solid album, well, all of them are solid albums for fuck's sakes. They're all excellent. But we wouldn't get to Zenyatta Mondatta without this first LP. And of course, standouts are Roxanne, Can't Stand Losing You. Actually, I will say this, and if you have yours already, let me know. If you have to think about it, we'll circle back. But my favorite traditional single of all time from the Police is Roxanne. They're essentially they're the one that catapulted them into stardom, their career.
This is I think it's actually Synchronicity too.
Synchronicity 2. Ooh, was that a single though?
I don't think it was a single.
So I'm talking about
okay,
singles.
I'm sorry.
I do have a second category: favorite non-single song.
Yeah, I guess that's my song.
Is Synchronicity 2?
Yeah,
it was. Actually, I just looked it up. It was a single. So
it was a single.
It was.
Well,
okay, so your favorite. So now you have to give us a non-single favorite non-single song.
Ooh, a non-single. Ooh.
So yeah, think about it. So Roxanne is my number one. Synchronicity 2 is Buck's number one.
What was King of Pain also a single?
King of Pain was a single. Yes.
God damn it.
King of Pain was a single.
If 3. You can't tell, I like Synchronicity.
Synchronicity. I love Synchronicity. That's why I put that joke in our thesis statement. I'm thinking about cutting that out and then leaving it as an outro because they're like, oh, what did they say? Like, cut it out. And if you listen to after the credits, because we're like Marvel, we have in credit scenes. You can get the right answer. Should I do that? Or should I just leave it in?
Just leave it in.
Leave it. Okay, well,
why not?
Buck's the boss, guys, so we got to leave it in. But this album was
okay to show behind the curtain a little bit.
But this album was excellent. It was great. It was new wave. It was kind of the post-punk to your point. It definitely deserves to be on the greatest albums of all time. All those lists, your Pitchforks, your Rolling Stones, your Spins, your whatever you read. Your I guess it's like your Fantanos now. I guess I don't know what to say now.
Melon, yeah,
yeah, but it's definitely up there. I do think it has some doesn't quite land at parts of the album, and that's why I was so surprised that Zenyatta Mandatta didn't get this got love, but Zenyatta Mandatta didn't get love. Zendaya Mandatta. But Regatta de Blanc is also a lot of the same. It's definitely evolution, but it's kind of like LP1 2.0. And of course, we get Message in a Bottle, Walking on the Moon, and we start to see that more Police signature sound. Again, this is because Sting was figuring out how he wanted to songwrite. But again, we know that Andy and Stewart added so much to the compositions.
Oh, yeah.
We know that because we have solo Sting albums that are just like, how should we put it, Buck? I don't know what the kids say now. I want to learn. So if anybody wants to tweet at us, X at us, Instagram us, email us. When we were growing up, remember this, Buck? We would make fun of like old people music. We would call it like adult contemporary. Like
adult contemporary. It's basically kids before VH1 and MTV just showed trash TV. They showed things called music videos. And MTV would show younger music videos, and VH1 would show more adult contemporary music videos. Like it was more of like what your parents would watch.
Yeah, it was a nice way of saying like,
young,
that's like old people music. Like, that's dumb. That's old people music. And
like
I guess
Luther
what do the kids say
Vandross.
now? That's boomer music. What do they say?
Boomer. Yeah,
that's boomer music. Ugh, who cares? But the point is like there's always going to be a dichotomy between the young and old. And young people are always going to probably think that older music, except for us, we kind of think a lot of the music is timeless. My favorite music still to this day is the music that was way before our time, like what our parents grew up with. Still some of my favorite music. So a lot of the best music in the world is timeless, but there's always going to be that cultural component of like young people thinking that older people music is kind of boring or dull or whatever, right? And my point is that when we listen to those solo Sting albums, we would kind of feel that way. That was like, okay, this is Sting, I hear his vocal. I know his vocal, but man, it's kind of boring and dull. And then again, we'd call it this is like adult contemporary. Like,
Yeah,
ugh.
I'll give you an example. Englishman in New York.
Okay.
Sounds like something your grandparents danced to while drinking wine after leaving the Olive Garden in
Like
the 90s.
fancy elevator music, not shitty.
Yeah. And remember Olive
Motel
Garden was
6 elevator music.
Yeah, and that's when
Fancy
Olive
elevator.
Garden was like a treat to go eat out at.
And
It was
now
actually
it's
a restaurant.
and now all the foodies make fun of it. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, they also changed the breadsticks recently, is what I've heard.
Oh,
I haven't been to an
my
Olive Garden.
God. I actually
since
can't.
2005.
Did you know that? I'm not allowed to because TV Del Rio won't let me.
Good for her. I like her even more now.
I know, I do too. She doesn't let me because she's like, she goes to Novo. That's not even food. That's not even real.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, TV Del
I
Rio.
agree.
This episode also brought to you by TV Del Rio.
This episode brought to you by Olive Garden.
But we clearly were seeing the evolution in these two albums, and then we get to Zenyatta Mandatta. Now, if you have heard our shows before, and we hope that you do, and we hope that you continue to listen, you know that we have we have like theses for like our shows as a whole, and this year has been kind of like a music year. Buck, we've been talking a lot of music this year,
A lot of music.
and we always joke
A lot of good
that
stuff.
LP3 in any band's discography is usually like the one where like they get it right, like, oh man, this is like a breakthrough, like, you know, OK Computer, and you know, there's a million examples, right? And for some reason, this is the middle child of these 5 albums that people don't give a lot of love to. So today, we're giving the love. We're giving the love. And I want to start with, let's just go, I want to do top to bottom. Top to bottom, we're going to go track to track. We're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to go on tangents, T-Buck tangent corners. We're going to do the usual AOTB thing, okay? And that starts with track number 1, Don't Stand So Close to Me. And the first thing that stood out to me with this whole album, Buck, and and then I'm gonna let you drive, is how much I actually liked the verses more than the choruses. You know, like most great songs, you know that chorus, you know that fucking Fleetwood Mac Dreams, you know, like that chorus that is so perfect, that is just stuck in your head all the time. I never connected with these chorus lines on this album, but man, the verse lines, a smile would just light up my face when I got to some of these sections, and that was the first thing that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think, well, just starting out, this album is one of the most classic Police songs ever, which is it's odd when we talk about this was one of the, you know, this is probably the least liked album, but it has like a very prominent
But
hit.
it should be the most liked album after Reexamination.
I don't think so, but that's okay.
It's one of my favorite albums.
It's one of your favorite albums.
I don't think I've ever just said that to you. This isn't just an episode of I want to do this because that's what we do on our show. We put a light on things that need more love. I mean, I do that too. This is one of my. This is tied with Synchronicity.
Wow.
Yeah, I like this more than LP1, LP2, and definitely a little of the overrated Ghost in the Machine. Though that is a great album too.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, no, I again, like we're starting out strong. This was the main single off of this album.
Synth lines that
yeah, it starts out, you know, very mysterious. But
like Buck.
I'm international
fan of mystery.
But yeah, I know it's you know, it's one of those that, like, you know, when you think of a band, you always think of a few different songs.
Sure.
You know, Roxanne, obviously.
Roxanne, yeah.
This is like one of those 3 I always think of when I think of the Police. So
really,
to me, it's
what's the other one then? Is it Synchronicity too?
Actually, no. Like when I was a kid, it was Every Breath You Take. It's probably the other one.
Oh well, yeah. That,
but still on Synchronicity. Yeah.
Novo. Yeah, should have been Every Breath You Take.
Yeah, and it was mainly because you know, Puff Daddy.
Yeah, when Puff Daddy like remixed everyone's when he like
was the king of remix.
When he stole every like popular song that's ever been made and put a rap vocal on it.
Yeah.
But to success, I mean, that guy that's what made his career in the beginning. And then he had like a TV show and all this other shit. And now he is not looking good in the news lately.
He's definitely a creeper.
But let's pull it back again because track number 2, I think this will surprise you again. You know what I love to do on our show? Surprise you. Just you. I don't care about anybody else.
Don't care about anybody else. It's good.
Just you, because Driven to Tears, track number 2, is my favorite non-single song they've ever written in their whole discography.
Really?
Yeah. I fucking love the song. Favorite non-single song of all time. The song has power, and it is what I call a groove behemoth. Okay,
it is a very groovy song.
Fucking the whole album. Can we do another T-Book Tangent Corner? The whole album is groovy because remember that we had a little punk sensibilities, a lot of rock and roll sensibilities in LP1, and we got that in LP2 with a little more reggae, a little more sheen, a little more production value, and then this album fucking grooves, man. Oh, and I love a good groove.
I will agree with you. This is there's some very groove. Like I'm thinking about the bass line. It's very simple, but it's like very like you said, very you just get in a groove with it.
Yeah. And we got a rare Andy Summer guitar solo in the bridge, 8-bar.
We do. There's another song that has a guitar solo in it too. When I was listening to this again, I was like, oh, there's another one.
I want to say
it's Bombs Away. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah, no. I actually, when I was going back through, one of the things I do when we prep for these shows, I look through. If we're talking about a
Spotify,
the
Spotify metrics,
and also which songs I've liked off of albums. This song is one of them I've liked. So,
I did
that back in like 2017.
It's like your own like quality control of like, I did like this 10 years ago.
I actually liked the first 4 songs off of this album.
I feel like the first half is really the shining beacon of
strength.
Strength, absolutely, of the overall album. The third act of this piece, Driven to Tears, is just a killer, and it's another example of just letting musicians be themselves. I feel like we are in this weird, kind of, we talked about auto-tune. We're in this post, Pro Tools post auto-tune time where I sometimes feel like the formula takes over a little too much, and the originality, the identity, the lone voice of the musician doesn't always speak through their songs. But in the Police, it does wonderfully, especially with Stuart Copeland as the drummer, because he was one of those drummers, and I can relate to this. It's why I got fired left and right with my auditions, is he never did the same take twice. That's why if you're trying to, tap along with, or air drum along, and you're like, oh, why did he add, he adds in these weird little flares here and there, and is because, a lot of his roots were, again, in the some of the Middle Eastern phrasing, but of course jazz, where there's a lot of improv, and you add to the needs of the song as you're playing it sometimes. And he was a master at that too. And it just, if it wasn't for drummers or musicians like this, Andy would do it, Sting would do it too. We wouldn't have that distinct Police sound either.
Yeah. And I mean, if you really listen close to his drumming too, I mean, it's pretty obvious where his influences and training was from. You can tell that with a lot of bands.
He's my top 10. Did you know that? He's my top 10 drummer of all time.
Stuart Copeland?
I love Stuart.
I think it was you that was telling me he was notoriously, like he would speed up.
He was a notorious rusher. Now, obviously not for the studio albums, because they probably play to a click. But live, part of the reason they famously in the news would be considered a band that kind of hated each other, is because stuff like that would happen. He would rush a lot. He would not drag. And of course, a lot of the butting of heads, of course, was coming from Control. Like any band, Beatles, Pink Floyd, any band you could think of that had a core group of musicians, and eventually one wanted to take over, and they were control freaks. The Police was no different. That's where they. But what's nice is I've learned that a lot of that was overblown. It was the media just like wanting to sell fucking magazines and newspapers or whatever they were trying to sell. They would like overly dramatize their conflicts. They had conflicts, of course, like any band has had. But they were very copacetic too. I think a lot of it was just kind of exaggerated media nonsense.
And that makes sense. I think Paul McCartney even said he thought that for a long time that what he read really did happen between him and John Lennon. Like they just hated each other. And then he famously said when that documentary came out a few years ago, rewatching the videos, they were actually getting along quite a bit. Yeah, were they getting annoyed with each other? Yeah, did they have people quit midway through recording?
Absolutely.
They did, but he goes, it really wasn't as bad as what I remember or like thought it was. So
I don't think it's ever as bad as,
I don't think it is
like
either.
every band or any artist that becomes this famous, they always get the lore around them
Yeah.
and the mythos. And part of that is because other people are writing about them, just like us. We're writing about them in a way with audio essays right now.
You're making assumptions like what was going through their head at this time.
That brings us to
stuff
track.
like that.
Absolutely. That brings us to track number 3. When the world is running down, you make the best of what's still around. And I, when I first read this track title, I was like, why didn't they just stop at when the world is running down? That would have been a fine track title, but they left the whole thing in. I think part of it. So the history around this album is it was made. Part of the reason I think it gets some of the press it does is because they were critical of the album themselves, and this because there was record company stresses. They were pushing them to make the album. They made this album in 3 weeks, which is lightning speed compared
really
to
fast.
Yeah. These days it takes 3 years to make one album, from a pop star.
We have some of our bands that have said that one song has taken them over a year to make.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is I think why I think this album is so playful and exploratory and experimental. My thesis, part of that was that pressure, but also it was kind of the band saying "fuck you" to the record company, because they're like, "Okay, well, we're gonna put our weird shit on this one. We're gonna leave the track titles long. We're just gonna." And in this song, in and of itself, is another groove behemoth.
Yeah, this is a very, very groovy song. Yeah, I'm thinking of like the little guitar riffs in this one especially, and it's kind of more playful and fun.
Yeah.
It does have like
a
a
mirror
minor
to
key
the
change
whole album,
but
and their use of, I think they became famous for experimentation with some of their pedals and stuff like that, or synthesizers, or just like auxiliary machines. But the biggest one they use is, of course, is the delay or echo. We probably know it as the echo now.
Yeah.
And they would play against their own echoes and create these like amazing pieces of music, and just as a power trio too. So the bridge in this song highlights their like mastery of the delay or echo.
Yeah, it's definitely it's that kind of key, like you said earlier, that signature Sting vocal sound that you hear a lot too with his
Absolutely.
vocals, where it sounds like multiple versions of him are singing. Which did he overlay different recordings on top of each other, or was this just fully delay? Okay,
always overdubs. Yeah,
it's overdubs.
Just for the vocal, there would always be 2 vocal overdubs to
2
create
vocal. Okay,
almost everyone, almost to this day, everyone uses that production technique just because it cuts through the mix, so you can hear the vocal melody.
You can make those little
shine
adjustments and not have to worry about it. Yeah.
And yeah, this is just, it's almost paired perfectly with Driven to Tears. Like it's almost like they're written together. Like it flows right into When the World is Running Down. And that brings us to track number 4, Canary in a Coal Mine. I don't have a lot to say about this. I will just say this. It's such a fun song. It's just a fun ska, reggae, upbeat, dancey like track.
Yeah, it's very, like I would say it's one of their more fun tracks that they have, and it's also a little bit more upbeat. Like you said, it's got a groove. It feels like it was a fun song to jam to, and that I think that's a big part of it. I think though, going into the next song,
Voices Inside My Head.
Yeah,
Voices Inside My Head is a prime example of how the Police was so great at giving each other space and then filling that space. Each part just perfectly constructed and placed for the needs of the song as a whole.
Yeah, it's very, I wouldn't say it's slow, But like you said, that's a good way of putting it in space. It feels very spaced. It feels very more relaxed.
The vocal melody is a kind of a surprise as well, because it's the closest thing I would call it that's akin to something modern is actually a string arrangement, because the notes are very tied together. There's
Mhm.
long held notes, and we usually don't, because the foundational music, you would think there would be something completely different, and then when we get to the actual vocal melody, it's it almost slows the song down a little bit.
Mhm.
It strangely anchors it, and it's one of those that you're probably not going to know exactly what he says unless you're reading the lyrics, like Buck would. And it does it to great effect. And this is just also another example of a great bridge outro that just grooves. That's another sub thesis for this album needing more love. It's an album that grooves.
I fully agree. Fully agree with that. It's not my most favorite song, obviously, on this album, but
I think it's a
It's-
standout though.
it's a more of a standout than other tracks on here. Definitely.
And that brings us to track number 6, Bombs Away. Another one that I don't have a ton to say about, but it does. It's kind of a solid bridge for the other half of the album, because it does, like we've said, there's definitely takes a turn for the remainder of the album. And as already stated, it's another shining example of a Andy Samberg guitar solo that you
Yeah, and you don't get that too often with this band. So it is something that is a little different. It's one that definitely caught me off guard when, going back through it again. I was like, oh, okay.
oh, I like
Here we
that.
go.
Here we go.
Got a little
A little
guitar
shimmery
licks in
guitar
here.
solo. Yeah, you're right. You're dead on, because for the good people that may not know the Police discography quite like we do, and maybe just know the hits, Andy Summer was famous for his constraint,
Mhm.
or excuse me, restraint, because he would again let so much space. There would be so much space in his guitar writing, and the figures he would write, and just kind of let the rest of the band fill in those gaps.
Guitarists are notoriously bad for not doing that. And
Oh my god!
there are some guitarists, especially ones that are that that are really good, that do it well and have that constraint, but are like kind of guitar gods. And then you have the ones that overdo it so much that it's almost a little annoying, and you're still surprised to this day why they're so famous.
Well,
It's kind of like a ball hog in like basketball. Like you have a point guard that never passes it.
oh, I like that. That's a perfect
Yeah.
metaphor. No, I like that. Or
So-
simile. And then there track number 7 brings us to D do 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 D da da da. And
Great song.
Great song. Is this? I'm trying to figure out which one is your favorite then of the second half. Is this it?
This is it.
This
Yeah.
is it. Okay. I will start with this. This is this is their second single off the album. Second to Don't Stand So Close to Me. But it's an enigma, Buck, because the things that stood out to me again that I really gravitated towards loving was the verses over the choruses. Poets, priests, and politicians, like stuff like that, where I was like, ooh, we're getting deep over here.
We're getting deep. We're getting into it. Yeah,
What's your favorite?
I think it was because when I was a kid, this was one of my favorite songs.
Oh, okay.
When my parents would put The Police on, would play this album, which I have that same copy to this day.
Nice. I'm jealous.
I know. Minor Buck tangent corner. Novo says when I die, he's getting my.
I want your
vinyl
whole
collection.
record collection. And my dad has a friend that has collected records his whole life. He has like an entire room just filled with boxes and boxes of them. I would like that as well.
Yeah, that's like a God. I'm not getting too far off anymore. But yeah, no. I don't know. It's just something when you're a kid and you like really like a song and it's kind of has that meaning to you. That's basically why with this one.
And we've been comparing them to the Beatles quite a bit. They were known as the second wave, the second British wave. The first being the Beatles fame. I don't think
British invasion.
I don't think they're as big as the Beatles. Sorry,
No.
but the Beatles is the Beatles. Sorry.
I think
But-
in the 80s there was like a collective like
Yeah, that they wanted it. So let's
yeah.
let's
and
name
then there was
this
a
band the
minor
second
one in the
innovation.
90s. I think
with
we've
like
talked about that.
Oasis or something.
Yeah, like the Britpop,
Yeah.
where I watched like the most pretentious British music reviewer go on this rant about how American music was so dark at the time. We just wanted to have fun. And I was like, cool. It lasted like 3 years, and even your own bands like kind of abandoned that too. Anyway,
Anyway,
Blur.
I Blur, yes, yep,
Yeah.
before the Gorillas. I bring that up because when I listen to this track 7, it reminds me of the Beatles' like Omly Da,
Only dot. Oh, that I've never thought of it
you know,
in
because it's
connection
just
with
like
that.
these
Yeah.
like it's just like syllables that
Yeah.
they're
It's baby talk.
musicizing. Yeah. And I do like it. Again, I think the strength personally is a lot of the vocal melodies of the verses over the choruses, and of course the musicality of the foundational compositions. And talking about composition is track number 8. So the rare instrumental on LPs at this time that like almost never happened because again the record studio. I think this was another fu to the record studio.
Mhm.
We've talked about this before. Like record execs hate this because it doesn't help to sell records.
Yeah.
But artists don't care. They're not there. I mean, they're there to make a living. They're there to sell records, but not like music execs.
Remember,
And
this is why most songs are around 3 minutes long too. Is
exactly, they're probably pressured. But
yeah.
I'm behind my camel is fascinating. So this was an Andy Summer instrumental. He almost did almost everything. I think for some of the drum sections, Sting hated it, and every time I listen to it, I just think of this is a horror movie. Like this is
Yeah.
that's
I,
that's that's what pops in my head.
I could see Sting hating this totally.
Oh yeah,
He was like,
when he
"Fuck
was
you!
leaning
I'm
into
going to go
adult
back to my
contemporary.
tantric sex." And yeah,
But
Sting,
it's a great track.
very famous
They
tantric
won a
sex
Grammy
person.
for this. You know, like it's a
I
great
know.
track.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see the frustrations in their music too. That brings us to track number 9, "Man in a Suitcase." It's clearly a song about their frustration about touring.
Mm-hmm.
Man in a suit, because he feels like he's just a
Man in a
man in a
suitcase.
suitcase. That's how
Yeah,
he feels.
and I mean, I can relate. I've lived that life before, not touring, but traveling a lot.
Now, another standout for this second half, I think, is "Shadows in the Rain," track number 10. I love this track, and you guessed it, it grooves. But it does a lot more. It does a lot more, especially near the end when we get to bridges and outros. It gets very experimental, and those little piano accents are just a chef's kiss. Mwah.
It's an interesting one. I feel like in my opinion, the end of this
Yes.
album, the last 3-4 tracks kind of start to fade out pretty quickly.
Really?
Yeah.
I think I like the ending more than the middle of the
Yeah.
second half.
To me, it starts I trail off.
He
I lose interest.
zones. He zones hard.
Yeah.
He zones hard. I think, it's a testament that, when Sting, Sting still tours and does his adult contemporary, and he still plays Police songs here and there, and he still plays this one. He plays "Shadows in the Rain."
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a testament to the power of the song. And then we end the album with another instrumental, "The Other Way of Stopping." This one was a Copeland joint. I think I'm biased because I'm a Stuart Copeland super fan. I loved how it ended. I think they all run together very well. I think it actually is a perfect album. And I will say this, and I know how I can get you to agree with me, Buck. All right, are you ready? You buckled in?
Okay.
If we've talked about this before on our other full career retrospectives, when musicians are gifted, talented, probably close to genius, and they have a large body of work, we have an impossible inner conflict as the audience because we can only compare them to the rest of their discography. So if this album was maybe one of 2 albums, let's say it was the only Police album, hypothetically,
Mm.
I think it would be people would lose their fucking minds at how brilliant this shit
Sure.
is. But because it's in the middle of 2 great albums and then 2 other great albums, we are slaves to comparing it to the rest of the discography, another King of Limbs situation.
Yeah, but I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
It's with, like you were saying, it's like you were saying King of Limbs, I think with the Beatles too. I mean, and maybe I'm misinterpreting, like Revolver and Rubber Soul.
Oh man, we said the same one at the same time.
Did we
Nice.
say Revolver?
Revolver. Yeah.
Yeah, I which I think is, people say things changed with Abbey Road. I think it changed with Revolver.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, you get some of those, but hey, that's also a testament to,
Well, people change, musicians change, and their
Yeah.
sounds evolve. But those are also, we don't live in this world anymore where, they,
Pink Floyd Metal is another one. I love that album.
metal, Meddle. I hear
Meddle.
Metal when you
Oh,
say
sorry.
that.
It's
Sometimes
the cold coming through.
metal. Oh yeah, that has what echoes on it. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's an excellent album. No, I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of fine examples. We get, we joked about Can and Krautrock at the top of the show. I actually want to do a show on Can. That's why I was thinking about it.
Oh,
But they're like
we
that.
haven't done a show on Can yet.
We've never done a show on Can. We need to. I feel like that'd be perfect for a show.
That Can is
Can
that would
and
be
New
fun
and all
because
those guys.
this would be you would be hearing a conversation between Novo and Buck from like 2008.
Yes, sir. But we still have them.
Mm-hmm.
But again, yeah, I think going to that point of like, we can only compare this album to the rest of their discography. And again, this is the middle child. In 1981, remember they made an album. They made an album approximately every year, and then they would tour behind it. So they were under like a time crunch. It seemed like all the time.
Yeah.
And in 1981, Ghost in the Machine, you can really tell that Sting was taking over more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted more control and more control. And that's,
he wanted more adult contemporary.
And that's why he was drifting away from them as well. Now, Ghost in the Machine is excellent. Okay. I do joke sometimes it's a little overrated, but it does have, okay. I have 3 tiers. My favorite single is Roxanne. My favorite non-single is Driven to Tears, but I also have a favorite. I need to give it some silly award, like the Frank Zappa Award for music for musicians. And Spirits in the Material World is like so complex on one hand, but
I do
so
love that song.
Beautiful on the other hand. I think the complexity as a musician, I gravitate towards that because it's just like, where is the one? That feeling, like
Mm-hmm.
how was this even made? I know how it's made now with a Casio, synthesizer, but
you know what I used to think he was saying?
What?
In that song?
What?
I thought he was saying asparagus in a material world when I was a young kid.
I hate to break it. It's asparagus. It really is.
It really is asparagus. God damn.
I looked at the lyrics. It's asparagus. No, it's spirits. It's spirits. And this is, this is when he was taking over, is because he wrote Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic like years and years and years ago, but he was like saving it, like he knew it was special, and then he was finally like, okay, let's record a proper, studio recording. That's why it's on this album. Like he would have saved it for his adult contemporary albums, but he didn't. He let them have this. Invisible Sun, Demolition Man. There's a lot more ska on this one. There's a lot more horns. It's weird because this album is actually 3 minutes longer than Zenyatta Mondatta, but feels shorter. Where Zenyatta Mandatta is literally shorter, but feels bigger. I think it's just how the music is written.
Really, because I feel like this album just blows by. I think it feels so short.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's my point. It feels it's longer, but feels shorter. It just
blows by. I got you.
Whereas Zenyatta Mandatta feels huge.
Zendaya.
It feels like a long, like double LP album.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a change just in the, like, all of the first 3 LPs, all the names went together. They all rolled off the tongue in an interesting way. Or Ghost in the Machine was a clear departure from that, but not necessarily from their sound. And for the record, the first 2 LPs have a French title. Zenyatta Mandatta is a made up word. It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It means whatever you want it to mean. Yeah, it's just made up nonsense.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people knew that.
No, I'm trying to figure out like where that came.
Well, Zen, like Zen Buddhism,
Okay.
and they use like some suffix of some word to make yada, and then they did the similar
Okay.
thing with Mondatta.
Like regatta.
Right. Yeah. So that's how it's Zenyatta Mandatta.
Gotcha. Zendaya.
And that brings us to the end of the police's career with Synchronicity. Synchronicity has been covered 1,000,001 times. We're not going to cover it again. We're not going to do it top to bottom. It's perfect. It's another perfect album, guys. Like, definitely, it has its, policified, it's not just a Sting.
It's peak Police.
Yeah, it's not just a
Yeah.
Sting, taking over and doing everything. Without Andy, without Stewart, we would not have Synchronicity. Like, I cannot stress that enough.
It's their biggest album of all time and their last.
I think it's a perfect place to end that career, their career. And every, kind of like Fitter Happier, I feel like every album like this that are just behemoths, like 10 out of 10, perfect album, they always have that one track you could probably skip. And for me, that's Mother. I'm not even sure why it's on the album. I skip it every time.
I don't even listen to Mother.
Yeah, I skip it every time. But in a weird way, just like the Fitter Happier example, I can't, like, if I haven't heard it in a while, I will listen to the full thing through, and I'm like, this does strangely fit. I can't put my finger on why, and every album is perfect, almost, except for Mother.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with you on that. It is the most stingiest album of all.
It's the most stingiest. It'll get you. Ouchie.
Yeah.
Ouchie.
Ouch.
Ouchie.
But yeah, I mean, you do see where even Sting was going, and I'm glad you brought up the adult contemporary thing, because I remember.
Isn't that funny?
Remember that Best of Sting CD? Do you remember which one I'm talking about?
No, I started with the Best of the Police, so
okay.
I cheated.
No, it's fine. I'm just remembering. I remember this being in the 5-disc CD, or no, I think at this time we had a 30-disc CD changer. Because mid to late 90s, those were all the thing. But
30.
That goddamn album came on all the time, and I had to hear Englishman in New York all the time, and then The Fields of Gold.
Oh God, yeah.
Or is that what it's called?
He does have some tracks that I like, that he did just with his solo stuff, but it just doesn't have that, what I call the special sauce of the Police. Like, the Police had special sauce.
Yeah,
this is more of those three guys together.
Sting was just maturing, and he just wanted to.
Well, he wanted to call every single shot, and that's why he went solo. And luckily, at this time, he was already becoming a huge star and icon because of his acting career too. See Dune here, and the rest is history. He still tours under his solo shit. But the rest of the band, what's great is, though, the rest of the band had great careers too. Andy has always been a studio musician. He was a veteran before he even met fucking Sting and Stuart Copeland, and he's released solo albums, and Stuart Copeland does. I'm shocked at how many scores he has written. He is quite the multi-instrumentalist, the composer. He writes operas now. I mean, these guys are just like so talented, and that's why they will forever influence us forever. Like that, this is like one of those bands, just like we joked about, like the others, like the Beatles, like you name it. Like, this is going to influence music for all of time, till the end of time. So, guys, there you have it, Zenyatta Mandatta by the Police. I want to thank you for listening. I want to, of course, thank my guest, Mr. Theodore T. Buckingham. But before we go, we got a little extra for you, a little icing on the cake, cherry on top, with what we call the Gym of the Week. Before we talk gyms, though, let's talk sponsors. Today's gyms are brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is our go-to tool for remote podcast recording. So what's great is that you can record separate audio and video tracks, and it's all backed up on a secured cloud, so you never lose your hard work. Even better, it's easy to use, and there's nothing to download. So go to their website, zencastr.com, and use promo code Art of the Beholder and get 30% off your first 3 months with the pro account. Now back to the gyms. I'm gonna leave mine short and sweet so we can get back to our guest. I'm late to the party, but I finally got into HBO's Veep. It's very appropriate for this time of year, and it's excellent. It's everything a mockumentary should be.
I actually got around to watching Shogun, It is phenomenal.
Oh yes.
I haven't binge watched a show like that in a long time.
And guys, if you like that, you can of course check us out at NovoDayProductions.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. You know what to do. It's internet etiquette. And if you'd like to sponsor a little love child or be on the show, you can reach out to us at NovoDayProductions@gmail.com. So until next time, guys. So until next time, there we go. Be good to each other, and we'll see you in the next one. So as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created and hosted by Novo Day and the Novo Day Collective. Facebook.com/Novo Day Media, at Novo Day Media on Twitter and Instagram. Music by A Company. Facebook.com/ACOMusic123. ACO on Spotify. Logo design by Tom Justice, JESTUS, of thejusticecompany.com. All rights reserved.
Zendaya.
Zendaya.